This is kind of the end of the Christmas season, and I'll get to that and explain that later. But first of all, I'd like to share with you some of the things that I have put together in my mind, because we're going to spend this year with Luke, as we did last year with Mark. And I find Luke absolutely fascinating. Not a whole lot known about him, other than we know that he was a Gentile, because Luke is not a Jewish name. We're also told that he was probably a physician. And as you read through the Gospel of Luke, you find out he was also a very well-educated person. Now, the Gospel of Luke begins with what is called a prologue. And there's 4 verses. And the 4 verses tell us so much about this person. He's writing a letter to a friend of his, a friend by the name of Theophilus. And Theophilus is a Greek name also, and it means friend of God. These 2 men must have had quite a relationship, because he prepared the Gospel of Luke, what we call the Gospel of Luke, to present to his friend, so that he may know and understand the things that had been accomplished among them concerning the person of Jesus. He's very careful in doing this. It's like he's a historian, or maybe like a scientist, because he says to his friend Theophilus, I want to give you an account, a trustworthy account of all of the things that have happened. Now, I thought to myself as he wrote this, Theophilus must have asked him for this, for him to respond in this way. But the account that he wanted to give to Theophilus was an account that was trustworthy and true. Now, there were other accounts. The earliest ones that we're aware of was the Gospel of Mark. But Luke took the Gospel of Mark and he really filled it out, so that we might understand the person Jesus better. Mark is a very fast-moving account. One incident after another. Luke, his is not like that. He takes his time. He wants to present a full picture of the person Jesus, and also the person that Luke called Lord. Luke may even have been a friend of the Apostle Paul. There are just so many questions about him that we can't answer. But we can answer this. What he presents to us is trustworthy and true. He was a serious person. His friend Theophilus, which he called excellent Theophilus, and that means that Theophilus had a higher standing in society than Luke did. He was a serious man. And together, they wanted to have something that presented the reality of the person and the divinity of Jesus Christ. Now, He gives us a story today that nobody else gives us, either in Matthew or Mark or John. They start in different ways. This is the only story, the one I read, about Jesus as a boy. Now, I don't know when he started his ministry, 30 years of age or something, but this takes place when he was about 12 years old. Luke is the only one to mention that time from the birth of Jesus until his baptism. Now that is a big, long period of time. And it's like we don't have that much to fill that gap in. But Luke looked until he found a story that helps us to understand that period of time. And that's where we're at today, that period of time. And the story is that Jesus went up with his family up to Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of the Passover. This tells us Jesus came from a devout family, people who wanted to maintain the traditions of the Jewish people. He went up there with them. They came back and he stayed. When his parents saw that he wasn't there, I'm sure they were horrified and went back to find him. And these are the first words that we hear from Jesus from the time he was born until the time when he was 12. And after that, we don't hear words from Jesus again until he's about 30 years old. And the words are real simple. Why were you searching for me? Surely you know that I must be in the house of my Father. Short sentence. Those are his words. The words of Jesus are precious and few. And those are the only words we hear from him over a 30-year period of time. And so we ask, what does that mean? They mean exactly what they said. This is who Jesus was. He knew who his Father was. And he said, didn't you know I must be in the house of my Father? And when his parents found him there, they were amazed because he was sitting among the pious and the scholars, and they were discussing the scriptures. And his parents were amazed because he was sitting there listening and questioning these powerful people. And they were amazed. And his mother asked him, why did you do this to us? We were scared. And then he went home and he was obedient. And he grew in wisdom and in stature. I found it particularly interesting that what he was doing there was listening. listening to the wisdom of his elders. And he was questioning them so that he might grow in wisdom and understanding. When we think of Jesus, we often think of somebody that is fully grown with all of the powers and understanding that he had. But that's to overlook a time of preparation that he went through. Now, next week we'll talk about preparation again from John the Baptist, because nobody saw or heard from him again after his birth until about 30 years later. John, like Jesus, was preparing. He was preparing to fulfill his task in life, as was Jesus. This was something that didn't just happen automatically. Because when Jesus gave up his place in heaven at the side of God and became a man, he really did become a person. And when we are people, we have preparation to do, as did Jesus. And I guess if Luke hadn't put this story in there, in his gospel, that we probably never would have thought of it. But he did, and we do think of it. And for all of the other things that we have to give him thanks for, this is certainly one of them. He listened, he questioned, and he grew in stature and in wisdom. And from that wisdom, we have all received grace, because he took the time to grow into manhood and to take his mission seriously, which he certainly did. Now, Luke started that book with that short prologue, telling us right up front what he wanted to do. He wanted to provide an account that was trustworthy and true. Now, the other Gospels don't start like that. John ends like that, you know. John, at the very end of the Gospel of John, says, Jesus did many other things other than these, but these I chose so that you might believe, and believing have life in his name. Luke and John were different in that respect, because Luke started that way and John ended that way. But that's what these gospel writers have done for us. They have given us a true and a trustworthy account of these things that were accomplished among them. And they present them to us so that we might, like Mary, take these things and ponder them in our hearts. For this is what gives us sustenance and gives us purpose. And when I read of Jesus as a boy. That helps me. I'm still trying to grow up. He went through that. And he came out on the other side as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Because life was serious and important to him. And as I read this, that's what I want for my life. I want to be serious. I want to have wisdom. And I'd like to be like Jesus, able to share that wisdom. That's what we all want. But Luke has given us today a shining example to look at. Life is a learning process from beginning to end. And we're just somewhere along that continuum, each of us is. And when we get an aid to help us in that continuum, then we look at who it was that gave us that aid, and we give thanks to God for them. Now, a proclamation's never about Luke. Proclamations are always about Jesus. But we need to remember those who have helped us along that continuum. And Luke stands out, and he comes to us today, and he brings these words which are trustworthy and true. That Jesus said, "Did you not know I must be in my Father's house? Not that I choose to be, but that I must be." Because in his Father's house is where he could do two things. He could confess that God is his Father, and he could listen to those who surrounded him and helped him to grow in wisdom and in stature. Now, these are the last words that we will hear from Jesus until his baptism. So those words, those very few words, are the words that we cling on to at this point in time. As he said, "I must be in my Father's house." And we can look at him a little bit different. He's not the babe in the manger. He's not the grown man dying on the cross. He's just a youth. And I don't know about you, but there have been precious few times in my life that I have ever thought of him as a youth. And that is important, because without that period of time from his birth until his crucifixion, he grew up to become the man that God wanted him to be. that his Father wanted him to be. And ultimately, of course, that meant giving his life for you and for me. It helps me along my way to know that he had a period of growing to do. That helps me because my period of growing is still here. And it will not end. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm going to grow like that. Only one person ever did that, of course. And that was Jesus. But when I think about his growth, I want to be along the way with him, growing in gaining wisdom and gaining stature, and be able, as he did, to call God his Father. And that's what we want to do. We want to be able to call God our Father. Today we give thanks and praise, not only for the youth of Jesus, but that Luke, the physician, took the time to find everything he could about Jesus and to help us remember his words, his acts, his deeds, and his sacrifice. And we can all do that together. We're going to spend some time with Luke this year. And by the end of the year, we're going to know Jesus as Luke knew Jesus. And if we're able to do that, then we are very fortunate people.